Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years, pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world.
Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. This week is part 2 of a podcast interview with Jenna Csont and Whitney Pasch, who both work as yoga therapists in a clinical setting in the Chicago area. It was really important to me to take my time chatting with the two of them because for a lot of yoga therapists, this is the ideal job setup, the stuff working dreams are made of. And I know you heard a bit about it in the first episode, but I don't think it can be understated how much work Jenna put into this initially to get this kind of program started in their community. Jenna was doing organization level work as a solo individual who was opening their own doors and making their own connections. One of my What They Never Told You episodes coming up on the podcast will talk about how yoga therapy does not have easy jobs like a lot of us were promised, which means we are going to have to build the doors we go through ourselves. And I think Jenna and Whitney are such good examples of this. Even Whitney's talk in this episode about networking and connections is so important for us to hear as we do the hard but meaningful work of professionalizing ourselves. You won't want to miss a word of what they have to say, so stay tuned. And of course, please subscribe, follow the podcast from wherever you're listening. It triggers the algorithm to show the podcast to more people. And also, you will get notifications whenever we have a new episode drop. Also, if you would consider, please subscribe to my newsletter for all my up-to-date industry hot takes. If you're loving our new series on What They Never Told You, let us know at workinginyoga.com/contact. I love hearing from y'all, and I can't wait to read some ideas of what you were never told and wished you had been. Now, if you haven't gone back and listened to last week's episode with Jenna and Whitney, start with part 1, which will lay the groundwork for this continued conversation. So, when you're ready, here we go again with Jenna Csont and Whitney Pasch. So, riddle me this. If we're going to work this out as an industry, because say we don't have an overarching body that is leading the charge of having these conversations, how do we have these conversations amongst ourselves? How are we talking to each other as peers? Because again, like you, Jenna, I'm going to say I came from a place of privilege. I had clients as a yoga therapist who used their HSAs for my services, which is a huge benefit that they could come and use those for my services. And it depends on what your HSA rules are and how you bill them, of course. But how do we start having this conversation, presenting people with enough information that they can make informed choices about what their opinions are? How do we do that?
Well, I think you're doing a good job with that, Rebecca, of all of the conversations truly that you are having with people. And, you know, just like within yoga of how we share knowledge with each other of, you know, we can I can recognize my situation is maybe not what we'd consider a normal situation if that even exists. And, being able to share, you know, this is my experience. This is what I've seen within this context. This is the benefit or non-benefit that I've had. That can make it more complicated at the sometimes too. Yeah. And it's still very necessary. I know I would give a shout out to Stevie because I know you introduced Stevie Ingram. Us. Yeah. And, you know, reading Stevie's article about what would it be like to find alternative paths of regulation that might not have to be the same as what we think about with like Western licensure standards as well. So people like her and people like you and these people who are able to give us these broad perspectives so that people, like, I'm speaking from my lens of my experience, right? But people who can really give us these umbrella views of talking to all these different people. And, because I think when we're only looking at our own view, of course, it's much easier to say, oh yeah, let's do it, or no, let's not do it. But where there's so much of that puzzle that we're not getting when we do that.
Whitney, when you're out chatting with other people just in the world in yoga therapy space, do you ever get a sense that the public opinion amongst yoga folks is one way or another? Like, do you feel like people want this? If you're like in a group setting or a studio setting?
I haven't heard a lot about it one way or the other, to be honest with you. Um, uh, this is probably the most that I've discussed it with other professionals. I've kind of held my own opinion for a while. And oddly enough, it hasn't come up that much in like social spaces. Um, but I am curious now that you bring it up. I'm going to be around some yoga therapists this weekend. I might have to drop a line and ask a few questions about how they feel about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Conversation going.
I'm always interested to hear the pulse of like what people think about as they're out working in their jobs. Can we talk about the nitty-gritty of the job for a minute? So 9 to 5, y'all are working like a 9 to 5 job, which for no one else but yoga people is a dream. But for us, it's like, oh my gosh, we have a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. Like, is this the job? I see the nods. So like, yeah, that's like it's a 9 to 5 gig.
It is.
Yep,
It
it
is.
sure is. We're doing so many different things within a day, and Whitney and I have very different schedules too that cross paths. And uh, there are pros and cons to that too, I think, but we are salaried employees. So benefits are great. We love benefits, which can also be challenges, right? Because I know I won't speak for Whitney, and I know like for myself, moving from like working for myself primarily into that sort of setting was very challenging. It took a lot of months to kind of get used to the idea of, oh, I have to be here every day now.
Yeah.
But the work is so engaging and it's so variable. And, I mean, for neither of us, we're not just like sitting at a desk, from 9 to 5. And so, that feels like where the normal 9 to 5 ends for me is the fact that it's like within the constructs of that workday, but every single day is such a different variety of things that, it doesn't feel redundant in any way. It's grown on me over time.
Was the adjustment hard for you, Whitney?
Yeah. And this is validating to hear that it was hard for Jenna too. Um, it was really hard. When I first started, I was like, why am I so tired at the end of the day? What is going on? And, shocker, my nervous system wasn't used to this.
Yeah.
So it took a while to adjust. And yeah, as Jenna mentioned, our schedules are very different. I lead a lot of groups. So I have 16 therapeutic yoga groups that I lead every week. And then I see anywhere from like 1 to 3-ish private clients a week. And when I say like 16 groups, even saying that out loud, it sounds like a lot to me. If I was leading 16 yoga classes around the city of Chicago, and I have done that before, and I felt very burnt out, very, very toasty from doing that. This feels different because I am in one place. I'm not running around. So if we think about just even like the effect of bouncing around town all the time and getting to somewhere at a certain place, I stay, the clients come in and out, and there's repetition. So for the PHP level of care, those clients have many of them have yoga 3 times a week. And so I see them and I get to know them and there's community. IOP, it's going to be 1 or 2 times a week, but even still, it's very regular. So it's different than that uncertainty of showing up to a class. Who am I teaching to? What is traffic going to be like when I'm getting there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a stabilizing factor of being in one spot. And I know that some yoga therapists have been able to do that as well with their private practices, which I think is really great and frees up a lot of energy to do other things. So that's part of it. And then the clinical day is from 9 to 3:30. So from 3:30 to 5, there are no more clients in the building. We have meetings. I have supervision with Jenna. Yeah, we do that. So it's not like I am teaching yoga start to finish all day, every day, right? There's groups and then they have breaks in between.
Will you just define some terms for our listeners who might not know PHP and IOP? Will you just define those?
Yeah, PHP is a partial hospitalization program. So it tends to be a step down from residential level of care. That doesn't mean that it's always, linear like that. Folks can step into whatever level of care is appropriate for them and their team. And then IOP is intensive outpatient. Those are half days.
Quick break to tell you about The Back Room, my Patreon community for yoga and wellness professionals. Here's what it actually is. Every week you get a focus prompt, reflection sheets, and a shared working rhythm that you can drop into on your own schedule. There's no live calls, no required check-ins, no one telling you to hustle harder. There's a quarterly book club and access to a growing archive of guides and reflections, all connected to this work that we do on the show. It's built for people who want to think more clearly about their careers without the noise of social media and public discourse. It's $8 a month, and there's a free tier if you want to try it first. Find it at thesunlightexperience.com/thebackroom, and the link is in the show notes. So, y'all have vacation, right? You could go on vacation. Yes. Okay. So I just want all of you who are listening to know that both of the humans have giant smiles on their faces. I so want that for us. I want us to have vacations because I feel like we do such caring and nurturing work. Like, what a relief to know that you all can care and nurture for yourself. And that's built into the structure of your jobs. That makes me very happy. So how do other people do this? How is there, Jenna, you had said that you had 7 or 8 interviews. How did you get connected with the people who started this clinic? Who do you need to buy Starbucks coffee for? Tell us, how is there a replicable system that other people in other communities could do to get involved in something like what you're involved in?
Yeah, so I can't speak as much to the finding piece because that was something that I was able to just get connected with by I wasn't looking for that, I'll say, when I submitted for that. However, and it's the same thing, I keep coming back to for everything. I was like, education. That the conversation of that, and that's why that first conversation I had with Laura, our co-founder, always stuck with me, is because it was just that question of what is yoga therapy? I don't know what that is. And so really being able to clarify what that is, being able to talk about what could this look like in a clinical setting. I would encourage people to reach out to centers. Worst case scenario, they don't respond to you, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the pros and cons too of words like somatic therapy becoming more of a buzzword, right? Mm-hmm. Or more and more medical doctors, even if they don't know the full picture, right, are like, oh, you should do yoga. My husband's doctor recommended him to do yoga for a leg cramp he had the other day. And we thought it was funny because he doesn't do yoga. He supports me doing yoga though. But really but these words are coming into these spaces more and more, and our ability to actually build bridges and educate and discern the misinformation too, right? Of like, again, how do we stay connected to the authenticity and the roots of yoga? How do we, that is something I hear from clients a lot too, of when they've done yoga in other programs or spaces, they're like, we weren't doing this. We were doing like just the postures, or we were doing breathing practices, or, so really being able to look at yoga as a whole person practice and not extrapolating just one element of it and saying, because I think that's where it can come in and be like, oh, we're going to give our therapists like a hour workshop on breathing practices and we don't need like a yoga teacher, right? Because they don't know any better. And so, just get all the education out there, however you can do it. Reach out to people, put together PowerPoints. I love a good PowerPoint. I have so many now at this point. I've been very fortunate that I do a lot of, I'll do a lot of marketing events for us now as our somatic therapy program has become more popular. So I'm talking to a lot of other outpatient practices about our program and how we approach it. But that's another avenue where I've been able to weave in a lot of education on like what is actually yoga and what is actually yoga therapy and why is this valuable in this sort of setting, and why is this different than just, again, giving clinicians like a mindfulness workshop or a breathing workshop or something like that. So yeah, education all day for me.
Okay, Whitney, I want to hear your answer, and then we're going to talk about that 1 hour breathwork workshop for clinicians versus what we do after. We are going to go right into there. But first, Whitney, how can other people replicate this in their own communities?
Yes, networking is my number one piece of advice, I suppose. All of the networking, put all of the feelers out, reach out, send, Jenna talked to you about like reaching out to places, but like send a cold email.
Yes.
You can look on LinkedIn and maybe you guys both know someone, drop their name. Have an elevator pitch, have a little blurb in your initial contact with them that says, this is what I do, this is why it's valuable. Please reach out. And I think it's a lot of that, a lot of putting feelers out, of looking at who is in my network and then who's in that larger webbing beyond the people that I maybe know very well or am close, like professional contact with. So there's that piece, and putting yourself out there. And then also looking for all the jobs. I know that I've posted jobs on like Facebook groups that we have for yoga therapists. I know Jenna has as well. Don't always get a ton of turnout from that. So I'm like, just want to encourage anyone listening to like look, not that you're not, but like look for all the jobs.
Yeah.
Get in the groups, network, ask around. The more that people know your name in the profession, the more likely they are to also offer referral.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, network.
Okay, both of those pieces I think are just crucial. Those are the two pieces. Like if you're a yoga therapist and you're starting out, networking and educating people on what yoga therapy is, it's like the only thing you should be doing for way longer than you think. And you should connect with way more people than you think you should connect with. Like all the weird people, all the people who are like you met on a random Tuesday at a pet store, like everyone connect with all of those people. That's really good advice. I really want to get into this piece of people who are licensed healthcare practitioners reading a book or taking a 1 hour class or workshop or doing a 2-day intensive online, who then bring yoga skills into their practices because they don't understand that we even exist. Like, I don't even want to imply that there's any sort of malicious intent. It is just frankly that people don't understand that yoga therapists exist. Like, can we talk about that for a sec, Jenna? Like, I tell me all the things because I have so many thoughts. Help me sort them out.
Yeah, it is so true that I think it's nearly never malicious or with ill intent, and that comes back to the education piece as well. Um, I've been doing this long enough now, and I do like cringe a little bit, even like thinking about that because I've seen harm done by that happening, working with individuals and being in groups and, working with, we're working with very, very, very traumatized people at times with very traumatized systems and uh, therapist well-meaning of like, let's try this breathing practice or let's, kind of something they pulled from this thing and it doesn't always go the way I think. There's this idea that something like that can't be harmful sometimes too is kind of weird. Like it's like, oh, like anyone should be able to do a breathing practice or and like it's just not the case. You really do need to have again that kind of like whole person approach and especially when we're working with people who have a lot of dysregulation of their needs are going to be you really need to be able to adapt to what is happening for them in a moment in a way that you just can't do if you read a book or took a workshop and it's not to say no one could ever bring anything like that in ever, but we have to be so mindful of like why we are doing that, like what is our intention and what is the hope. And if we don't very clearly know those answers, to be able to question, is this appropriate for me to do this, right? Or, is there another avenue we could look at? So I have a lot of feelings about that.
Yeah.
Because I've seen the harm more times than I would have liked to at this point. And, it reminds me over and over again how important it is to have somebody who is a trained professional to work with that.
Yeah, I have also seen the harm in a way that makes me it makes me sad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I feel like those of us who have seen that out in the real world doing this job have equal amounts of stories that make them sad and make them laugh. Because like sometimes it's just the absurdity of somebody coming home with like, a one sheet worksheet that has like breath work and then pigeon pose on it. And they're like, look, it's the yoga. And I'm like, okay, like it's funny because we know that it's so very different. I'm curious what your thoughts are, Whitney, on the same thing. Like, how does this strike a chord? I know it does because I saw you nodding. So off you go.
Yeah, of course, of course. No, I have some thoughts. I'm thinking about breath work as what we know as yoga therapists is that there's so much more than breathing that goes into breath work and the way that the breath and the nervous system communicate with each other that requires a lot more training and education than, like a week-long program or something like that. So the understanding of like what we are working with when we're working with breath is so very powerful, so very powerful. And because of that, great change can happen and harm can also be done, as you both have named. And I'm just thinking of like something that comes to me and I'm just like, I chuckle, is just the concept of some very well-intentioned person telling someone that's having a panic attack to take a deep breath. Right?
Yeah.
They're very well intentioned. And
Yeah.
this person cannot take a deep breath right now. And if they could, I'm sure they would. So just like that kind of stuff, where even if you're just have a client sitting in a chair next to you and you're like, let's practice some deep breathing together, and they have never explored that before. Right? How is that going to go for them? How is their system going to respond to that? We don't know if we're not working with them. And again, if we don't have more of a knowledge of the connection with the nervous system and the back and forth communication that the two do with each other. So yeah, I have more thoughts. They're a little spicy, so we'll leave them there. Right.
Well, First of all, I welcome spicy thoughts, but I'm going to shift into the final question I want you two to answer. And this has really set this up perfectly because I am of the opinion that people are hungry for our work. Yoga teachers who are skilled and yoga therapists, especially. People want us out there doing the work that we want to be doing. And somehow that's not happening quite yet. Like we're ships passing in the night. And so can we talk a little bit about like the desire that you're seeing for people to do the work that we're doing? And that's the final thing because I want to leave people with this idea. I feel like there's a story that is often in people's heads that there is not enough work and not enough people want us to be doing this work. And I just think that's flat out wrong. It is just a mismatch of how we're connecting. So I would love for our final like piece to be that piece. Jenna, will you go first, please? Before we keep going, I want to tell you about something I built because it didn't exist and it should have. Inside Yoga Magazine is a trade magazine for yoga professionals, not a wellness lifestyle blog, not a beginner's guide to down dog, a trade magazine, the kind that treats our work as the legitimate profession it actually is. It's digital, it's ours, and it's the first of its kind. If you've ever picked up a trade publication in literally any other industry and thought, why doesn't yoga have this? Well, now it does. You can find it at InsideYogaMagazine.com. The link is in the show notes.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. Firsthand, like this is the people want it. The people want this work.
Yeah.
You know, we're obviously living in very, very challenging times. We're going through traumas, not just individually, but there's systemically. You know, we are really a traumatized nation right now in so many ways, and people are so tired, I think, of the same, just it's like we're on the hamster wheel, you know, and there's no way out. And I think this idea, and I, you know, like a broken record, but that is why the education piece is so important to me, because people know they want something different. And it's the idea of like helping people know we exist, because they're like, something's not right and they need help getting there. So like people don't know what they don't know, right? And they know when something is off. And so, you know, we're about to go into our fourth year of programming, and you know, circling back to I think even how I started this conversation today, of we have so many clients that are coming to our program because they want to do body-based work. We have so many outpatient providers that are referring people to our program because we offer something that is not happening on a wider scale. And my great hope would be that that would start to catch on more. I'm like, I don't want to sit here and be like, I'm extra special and that's why we're doing this, right? Like this can be done. And I want to be proof that like this can be done and that other people can bring this into other spaces, you know, that it's like, so just being able to like remind people that it's possible. Is it challenging? Of course. And it is 100% doable, 100% doable. If I could build this with Whitney and Teresa and all of the other wonderful people that, you know, I've had on my team, there's absolutely no reason why another skilled yoga therapist could not do the same thing.
Yes. Whitney, thoughts?
Seconding the education piece, yes. And also like telling maybe education, but in an informal way, let people know what you do. Let people know what yoga therapy is. It can involve stretching and it's not stretching. It's, you know, a bunch of other things too. So I think keeping that conversation going, and then also I do believe, and maybe this is wishful thinking, but that's okay. We can have some hope. That other like treatment centers, whether it be for like behavioral health, mental health, physical rehabilitation centers, I think are starting to pick up on there is this missing link in a lot of Western medical models, which is tending to the nervous system, the soul, the spirit, however you want to name that. And I feel like here, like what Jenna was saying in Chicago, that we get a lot of people that come to this program specifically for the body-based work. If other businesses catch on to that, maybe they'll bring in body-based work too. So I mean, kind of like a, like a snowball effect, that it will grow with education, with word of mouth, coming back to networking again, coming back to that. Yeah. Yeah.
I add to, because it makes me think of all the things we're talking about, of how we can also, even outside of the insurance or the licensure conversation, maybe how we can set the standards for also what we want this to be in these spaces. Because even the idea of how it's starting to become more popular, right? Or even like trendy in some ways, that can be a really slippery slope too, right? Of latching onto the term and running with it. So this is twofold of like not just it catching on as popularity, but be the people who are bringing that information in that from that place of those roots and those authenticities. Like if we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it, and people will take that term and run with it. And again, it's not malicious, it's not poor intention, it's just because they don't know. So like we have the opportunity to set the standard in a different way, I think, than even the licensure conversation even holds.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to highlight this final piece. It was while Whitney was talking, this kind of bubbled in my brain, because I do think that as you go through yoga therapy training, the assumption is that when you graduate, you are going to be a contract worker of some kind somewhere. So there's a lot of advice that I think is given to yoga therapists about what their profession is going to look like. And so you're supposed to find a niche, like find that one thing that feels the most magical and special to you, and that's just who you're going to be for the rest of your life. But I actually so wholeheartedly agree that a lot of the work that we can be doing right now exists in the mental health and wellness spaces. I had somebody else who's coming on right before your podcast comes on, Shell Ald, and Shell works at a school district in northern Minneapolis. And all she does is see teachers. She sees private client teachers for the school district, which is like insanely wild, cool work. And it's all in that sort of like mental health and wellness, nervous system regulation space. So if people are listening and they want work, is there something they need to be reading or watching or listening to that will make them more ready to have these conversations? Do you have a couple resources that, yeah, go?
I could share some resources, but I want to say first, because this is a component I think I mentioned in the very beginning, but didn't touch on as much, and I think is important, is so much of my job as it grows is you saying working with teachers is what reminded me of that, is working on a systemic level with this work of how do we actually create an entire trauma-informed, embodied system of care. And so I'm doing a lot of work around, again, how do clinicians actually regulate their nervous systems in the moment versus compartmentalizing, right? Outside of that space. How do people prevent or curb vicarious traumatization of being exposed to this material day in and day out? Even the monetary incentive of that, because places are businesses. And I'm like, it is less overhead and less cost to build this work into your system than it is to burn out clinicians and have to get new ones because they can't do it anymore. So I wanted to like throw that in there too. I know that's not the question you asked, but like that it's not just about, there's so many different ways we can belong within the system. I really, really believe. So I know Whitney, both of myself we have training in somatic experiencing, and this is a we'll bring into our body-based work as well. So in the trauma lens, I always recommend like any of Peter Levine's books because they're all pretty like I was kind of like Grandpa Peter. He's such a cute little old man, but he's the guy who created somatic experiencing, and his books are like readable. They're not like he goes into some science and things like that, but they're like really practical for like day to day. So if someone's specifically wanting to get into the trauma world of work, he's kind of my first go-to of exploring that. And Teresa, our other yoga therapist, she's like SE and yoga therapy go hand in hand, and they really, really do. I remember she said that in her interview when we hired her. I love Ariel Schwartz so much. She is absolutely phenomenal. She has a ton of free resources, and she is so good at also blending, modern neuroscience with staying authentic to the roots of yoga. And she does a lot of like groups and she does all kinds of stuff. She's a very wonderful person too. So that might not be on like the business end, but in terms of like the educational end of like working in those sorts of spaces, those are like my top picks probably off the top of my head.
What about you, Whitney?
From more of like a business lens, these are not specific resources, but my advice would be to research the level of care that you are interested in exploring. So if, especially if you're looking to work in like the mental health world, familiarize yourself with IOP, PHP, residential, familiarize yourself with clinical terms. If there is a specific organization that you want to work with, research the bleep out of them as much as you can. So that if you do reach out to them and are trying to collaborate or get work with that organization, that you know what you're talking about. You can relate, this is the clinical terms things, you can relate the yogic teachings, concepts, principles, like the stuff that we do to the clinical world that these folks are in. And I think it's very important, and it can be a leg up to speak the same language in that, and to have some understanding around like how the programming is run too. So that would be my advice. Maybe not one specific resource, but doing some research. Yeah.
I think first of all, I think you two are such a great combination for this because you have similar and yet distinctly different advice pieces. So I think it's like beautiful, and thank you both for coming on the podcast. So I know you all work in a clinical setting, but if you take followers, how do people become obsessed with you all is what I'm going to say. Like, can they follow you on social media? Do you have a Substack? Do we write you paper mail that is delivered by carrier pigeon? And tell me how that works. Jenna.
Yeah, my social media presence is off and on these days because I'm doing so much in-person work, but I do have an Instagram, Jenna Csont Yoga, so people can follow and contact me there in the yoga world. And happy to be friended on Facebook too. I do use Facebook as well sometimes. They can find me on LinkedIn too. So you could look up my name, Jenna Csont, CSONT, and we could connect through there too. So if anyone finds me on Facebook or something like that, would just invite them to like shoot me a message and, say like, oh, I, heard of you from this, just because, there can be a lot of other random stuff on there. But yeah, those are some spaces that people want to connect. I'm happy to like talk about this and follow up, or for other people who are just interested in kind of weaving into this world. So like very much welcoming the connections for anyone who wants to know more.
Whitney, how can we become obsessed with you?
So Instagram would probably be the best place to connect. Whitney Pasch _yoga. Whitney Pasch Yoga. And I do have a Facebook page too. Instagram is probably the best way to reach me. And I am all about like chatting, connecting, especially if you are a yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and you feel like you are running around to 8 million different places and like you're like off on an island by yourself because you don't have coworkers, because you're running around all day, right? It's important to connect. It's really important to connect with other people in the field, especially if you do not have like built-in colleagues. So feel free to reach out, feel free to connect. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation. This was so good.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. This was really fun.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure to finally make this work today. I'm so glad we did it.
Thank you both so much for this amazing conversation. This week, as you go about your yoga professional life, ponder on the different ways that you can raise your educational level. Even books and free offerings are great tools, and then go network with someone new. And bonus work for you yoga therapists out there, practice telling people what yoga therapy is everywhere. Nobody's going to do that work for us, so let's go build some doors for ourselves. Now, next week on the podcast, I have Stevie Ingram talking about the financial viability of moving our training into higher education models and what it means to build collective-based organizations for ourselves. Stevie has recently become a naturopathic doctor, so she has quite a lot to share with us on the professional path of holistic health folks. Stay tuned. Now, let's go get to work, and I'll catch you around the water cooler next time.